G'day everyone, and welcome back to Derriere Farms with myself, Farmer Jay. Today we find ourselves back on Obeilon, which is my test map for all sorts of things, specifically precision farming. And as you guessed by the title of the video, that's what I wanted to talk about. Not necessarily precision farming by itself, but I want to talk about the environmental score that was introduced with Precision Farming 22. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, especially whether or not the financial bonus / penalty that comes with your environmental score is a good thing or is ruining the DLC. Now, I know it's not, I've got caught up in that myself. But for a lot of people, the environmental score with its bonus is a major sticking point. They want to get to 100%. Naturally. I did too. But there are two problems. One, you are never going to get 100% across the board for a variety of reasons. I've tried it, it's just not possible. I've tried it on a couple of different maps. Yes, I've been able to do it on certain fields, and that's a topic for a completely different video. Speaking of completely different videos, I know that precision farming has been out for several months now, and there are numerous videos about precision farming. However, like I said, we are now so many months into precision farming, yet the debate continues to rage about the environmental score. There's currently a very heated debate going on. I've seen one on Reddit, and I've seen one on the Giants forums about environmental score versus yield, and it hasn't quite turned to name calling yet, but it's got pretty close, with people telling other people they don't know what they're talking about. The environmental score is more important, no, yield's more important, and back and forth. If you're a long-time follower of the channel, you know I've already done a couple of topics on how to deal with both yield, to maximize your yield, and to maximize your precision farming environmental score. In other words, on how you can have your cake and eat it too. No pun intended, because, well, the bakery. But I can't help but feel that the environmental score has done more damage to the reputation or the enjoyment of precision farming than it has done to draw people into precision farming. And I'll go into those reasons in a second. But let's take a quick look back at precision farming in Farming Simulator 19. For those of you that didn't play Precision Farming 19 or didn't play Farming Simulator 19 at all, it was a very good start. The Precision Farming DLC, it added a new depth of realism, much like this one does to the game, where you actually have to start worrying more about nitrogen and pH levels, the amount of fertilizer, the amount you use, and so on. But there was no environmental score in Farming Simulator 19. You focused on your nitrogen levels, you focused on your pH levels, you focused on weed control, and maximizing your yield. And that typically is what most farmers concentrate on the most, is yield. There is no ranking system for real farms. telling them what their environmental score is. If you watch Cole the Cornstar, he's done a couple of videos recently where he talks about how his farm is trying to maximize or to reach a certain number of bushels per acre. Based on the land type and consultations with his agronomist, they agree it should be possible. So they are focusing on that. Now, they don't have precision farming equipment. They're using standard equipment. Anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. Which brings me to the other big complaint I see about Precision Farming 22. And I've seen a lot of people post that they don't like it because to reach a maximum environmental score, they aren't able to use half of their equipment. Not necessarily their equipment. Half of the equipment in the game library is rendered useless, i.e. plows and shallow cultivators and weeders, spaders. I can think of numerous things that technically go against your environmental score. But again, as I said, there are ways to work around that so you can have your cake and eat it too. And we will go into those in a little while. For those of you that haven't watched my previous video, just to give you a quick overview of how to do that. But I find it's more important right now to talk about the environmental score, its bonus, and what it gives you. So for those of you not familiar, or those of you struggling, the environmental score, and let's get rid of this economic analysis, ranges anywhere from 0 to 100, depending on what you do. So if you get 0 somehow, and you actually have to work at getting 0, you have to go against everything the game stands for to get a 0% environmental score. Typically, when you buy a new field, you start at 50%, which is neutral in terms of your percentage sales bonus. If you get it up to 100, you get a 15%. If you get 0, and again you have to work at getting 0, you lose 15% of your sales. So you start at 50%, a neutral score. The first thing you have to do, if you want to take advantage of precision farming, is you have to take soil samples. That's going to go from neutral of 7.5 up to 15. So already you've gained almost 8 points. And I'm going to keep track of the points just so we have a base point. The other thing is, you'll notice I am doing my own thing, as I have done in my other videos. I'm plowing where I need to. I am cultivating other fields. And then I'm making sure the rest of everything else, mulching and so on, is taken care of. And I still have a 97% environmental score. Again, more on that later. Okay, so 50% plus 7.5, so you're at 57.5 points after taking your soil samples. So the next thing you have to do with all of your fields is you have to take care of the pH. Just by putting down lime, which you have to do base game anyway, you're going to go from a neutral score of 7.5 up to 15. So that's another 7.5 points you're going to get. So that brings us up to a score of 65. Now, let's take care of your nitrogen, which you're going to take care of anyway. The reason my nitrogen score is a little bit low is I haven't played this map in a while since the update to precision farming came out. So my fields, like this one down here, I've got a 0% score for nitrogen because it was a soybean field. But precision farming has since been updated to take care of that. So let's say on average, I'm going to have a 28 to 29 point score for nitrogen. Again, neutral being 15, so let's say I'm going to add, instead of 15 to get it up to 28, 29, I'll add 13 just to be conservative. So just by taking care of my soil samples, my pH or my lime, and my nitrogen, I'm up to almost a 80% environmental score. That puts me in the 8 to 10% range in terms of my environmental score bonus. Now let's say that I do the bare minimum and I don't actually do spot spraying, I just do weeding, so I only get 10 points. So 15 again. Alright, sorry, I had to put you on pause because somebody wanted to talk to me. Anyway, so let's just say you do the bare minimum of what you have to do. You're going to end up with probably an environmental score of 80 to the 90-ish percent range, which is going to give you a, say, 10 to 12% bonus on your crop yields. Sorry, not your crop yields, your crop prices, as well as production prices. So let's just go with an average of 10. A 10% environmental score, or not environmental score, but a 10% bonus is still quite reasonable, especially when you start factoring in other factors. When you start looking at, not necessarily, yes, you have to now start looking at crop yields to figure out how good or how bad this is. And yes, I'm going to use a heavy-duty cultivator on this field, and it's not going to make a darn bit of difference. And again, I'll go into that in a second. Right now, we're looking at crop yields. So, like I said, let's look at penalties, yield penalties. I'm standing here in a sorghum field. This was the one that used to be my soybean field. And as you can see, my expected yield is 116% out of 125%. So I'm losing a fair, decent percentage of my potential yield because I have weeds in the field. Now, I can use the spot sprayer. And as you can see, I'm now up to 123% of 125%. So I've taken care of my weed problem. That's small weeds. This is the catch with precision farming. So I'm going to finish spraying this field, and this is for those of you that haven't seen any of my other videos. And so I'm at 125 of 125%. So I'm going to get maximum yield out of this field now. I have no weed penalty. I am not going to, at least not today or in this month, I am not going to take care of field 39. I'm going to do what Giants recommends and use the spot sprayer when the weeds are medium. Now, the reason I say that is, again, a recap for those of you that are new. If you use a heavy-duty cultivator like I used, you get small weeds the first month. They will then grow to medium weeds the second month, and of course the third month they'll grow to large weeds. Same thing as if you use either a shallow tillage equipment, the weeds will go straight into stage 2, so they become medium weeds the month after you plant them. If you use a direct tillage like this one here, it's exactly the same thing as using a shallow piece of tillage equipment. The field will go from no weeds to medium weeds. This will become very important in a second. Okay, so here we are the next day in field 30, as I said we would be. The weeds are now medium. And let's go spot spray them. The weeds, somehow they missed that one, but here where the weeds have been taken care of, because I let the weeds get to medium, I am still suffering that yield penalty. I'm at 115 of 125. Same as if I hadn't taken care of the weeds over here. So I'm still suffering the yield penalty. That's why I don't use a medium cultivator, shallow cultivator, or just do direct drilling. Because I have that penalty for my weeds, which is 8 point something, let's call it 9%. The other thing is, let's turn off weeds here. As you can see, I sometimes forget to mulch my fields. Now, mulching is a base game requirement, and that's another 2%. So I'm now losing 10.5% of my potential yield. There are also a lot of people that they don't necessarily forget to mulch, they just don't bother with it because it's 2%. And it takes so much time because there is not a large mulcher in the game. Anyway, my point is, this field is now corn, and it was barley before, so there was no need to plow it. Hypothetically, if there had been a need to plow it, because the plowing requirement still applies with precision farming, I would lose another percentage penalty, yield penalty, for not plowing. Base game not plowing is, I believe, 15%. I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's cut. It's not as severe in precision farming, but you do definitely suffer a penalty for not plowing after corn or sugar beet or potato, the crops that require plowing. So I can now be at a 15% yield penalty. So I'm getting 15% less crop than I would otherwise have been doing. And that totally negates my environmental score. Even though I did everything Giant said, I didn't plow because of the negative tillage. I did direct drilling. I did X, Y, and Z. I did everything Giants said to get my reasonably maximum. And again, it's still going to be 90% environmental score, which will give me, as we saw here, at 98%, I'm getting a 14% bonus. Well, I'm losing 15% of my crop yield. So I'm down 1%. kind of ruins the whole concept of the environmental score, and I can see why so many people are frustrated with it. And I can see why the arguments in the forums are so heated between the people arguing that you have to do what Giant says to get your maximum environmental score versus those that are arguing, no, you want the maximum yield. So essentially, by doing everything Giant said, like I just said, you are negating the environmental score with your loss on yield, and that's assuming you are just doing crops. Goes the next argument. If you have a high environmental score, you are going to make up that loss in productions because you're going to get paid your, say, 14%, 13-14% extra on productions. Fair enough, but you also have 15%, let's say we're going to go with that number again, less percentage of input going into that production. So that production could theoretically be losing 15% of its output, your opportunity cost, right? Essentially, you are making 15%, well, say you maxed out your environmental score. You're making 15% more, but depending on the product or what's going on, you're losing up to 15% of your inputs. Now, this obviously applies mainly to things like cereals. It doesn't apply to the dairy where it's milk. But I can see why people are on both sides of the argument either do what Giants say or do it its other way, or just ignore the environmental score and do what you need to do. Why the debate is so heated. Because even if you just do what you have to do, assuming, like I said, you take care of your nitrogen, you take care of your lime, do minimal weeding with a hoe, and a hoe will actually get rid of those medium weeds, so you get your yield penalty back, or you don't suffer the yield penalty for weeds. It goes away. So I can see both sides of the argument. The problem is, the way I see it, the fact that the way that Precision Farming 22 is being implemented is causing so many arguments and so much grief amongst players is a major problem. And in my opinion, therefore, it should never have been put in place. It's a nice concept. Well, actually, being a nice concept, maybe it should have been fine to put your environmental score in there, but not have it tied to a financial bonus system where people are more focused on getting the 15% financial bonus, but they're also losing a large percentage of their crop yields. So say you got an 80 to 90% environmental score, which wasn't tied to anything. You were still able to maximize your crop yields. I think people would have been much happier, just like they were in Farming Simulator 19. Alright, having said that, final thoughts for those of you that have not watched the rest of my precision farming how-to videos. If you want to have your cake and eat it too, do what I'm doing. Take a field. We're going to say it's a new field, so you haven't had the chance to mulch it yet. So take a regular cultivator, not a shallow cultivator, and or a plow if the field needs plowing, and do your initial tillage. Then make sure you use a direct seeder. The direct seeder will offset your penalty for plowing or cultivating, and there are a couple of them in the base game, going up to 8 meters in the base game. And if you go on to Mod Hub, there are quite a few more direct seeders, like the Borgo pack, which I highly recommend if you're running a big farm, that are also direct seeders. There's the Hatzenbische, which is a direct seeder. All of those seeders will negate, like I said, your penalty for plowing, your tillage penalty. If you're using a cultivator, you get small weeds the first month. Then use your spot sprayer because it reduces your herbicide costs, still maximizes your weed control. You don't suffer a yield penalty. You don't suffer a yield penalty for your tillage. You've already hopefully fertilized. If not, go ahead and fertilize, depending on the type of drill you used. Harvest. You can at that point either lime your field again, or you can mulch it and then lime it, and then you're back to square one where you're either plowing or cultivating it. That way you get maximum yield and you get your maximum environmental score. That's why I'm at 98%, because I followed those steps. Final thoughts. The environmental score, like I said, was it was a good idea on paper. The way it was implemented by tying it into an extra percentage of profits was a mistake. Because, how do I put this? Because from what I've read and the videos I've seen, it forces people, unless they know better, to choose one path over the other. So you're either maxing yield or you're maxing your environmental score or trying to max that. And unless you know the ins and outs of precision farming, you don't know how to have your cake and eat it too. And as such, you end up probably revenue neutral, and you lose all the bonuses you would get. That's my 2 cents. I hope you found the video useful. Sound off in the comments whether or not you agree that the environmental score was either good or bad. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Jay.